And welcome back to the Wellness Paradox podcast. I'm so grateful that you can join us on this journey towards greater human flourishing. As always, I'm your host, Michael Stack, an exercise physiologist by training and a health educator and health entrepreneur by trade. And I'm fascinated by a phenomenon I call the wellness paradox. This paradox, as I view it, is the trust, interaction, and communication gap between fitness and wellness professionals and our medical community. This podcast is all about closing off that gap by disseminating the latest, most evidence-based, and most engaging information in the health sciences to help fitness professionals ascend to their rightful place on the healthcare continuum. And to do that in episode 45, I'm joined by Dhruvin Patel. Dhruvin is an optometrist by trade, but started a company called Ocushield. And Ocushield produces products that are designed to filter out blue light. Now, if you've only peripherally heard of blue light, I wouldn't be surprised because I haven't heard a ton about it from a scientific perspective prior to having this conversation with Dhruvin. But as we're going to discuss, the ability to filter out blue light through products and do other things related to eye health can have a profound impact on overall health. As an example, filtering out blue light effectively, which blue light is in all of the devices that we're on all day long, filtering out blue light can actually help improve your sleep by better setting your circadian rhythms and by encouraging the proper secretion of melatonin, which puts you asleep near the end of the day. So I think you're going to find this conversation fascinating. I know there were so many nuggets that I took out of this that I've just never considered, given my background in fitness and exercise physiology and my limited engagement with anything related to eye anatomy or physiology. Any information we'd like to share from this episode can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 45. Please enjoy this conversation with Dhruvin Patel. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Dhruvin Patel. Dhruvin, thank you so much for joining us on the Wellness Paradox.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
We are very excited to have this discussion with you. And as our listeners can hear from across the pond in England, it's a snowy day here in Michigan. And we were just talking about how England doesn't handle the snow very well. So I'm glad to hear you don't have to deal with that. Yeah. Before we launch into this, what I think is going to be an interesting discussion for our listeners, because I don't think they often contemplate eye health as fitness and wellness professionals. Let's just start with a little bit of context for the discussion. And why don't you tell us about your background?
Yeah, totally. So my name's Dhruvin, as you know. I grew up in London. In 2011, I embarked on a journey to become an eye care professional. So I started studying optometry at City University, London. And when I was working there, actually, on the weekends, I was working at a well-known optician chain called Vision Express, which in America is called Grand Vision. And, you know, earning a few bob to supply my studies and also get a bit of industry experience. And what happened when I was studying, working on the weekends, was the lead optometrist, she gathered the team, including myself, and she said, hey, we've got this new product innovation for people that wear glasses. And she said it was a coating called Blue Control. And effectively, she said, if any patients had this on their spectacles, they'd be able to beat eye strain from screens. So this was in 2013. And I was quite naturally intrigued because my mother's always told me when I'm looking at screens that they're bad for your eyes, right? But when I challenged her, she didn't have an answer. She just sit far away, don't stare at screens. So anyway, I was quite intrigued by this. I thought, is this the missing piece to the puzzle? So I ran back to the university the next week and I demanded from the faculty, I said, hey, I really want to do a research project around this. So I did a research project on how blue light affects the eye's physiology and circadian rhythm. So our, eye structures and our sleep and wake cycle. And after 9 months of doing that, I found that not only did blue light from screens and around us cause eye strain and fatigue and headaches, but it also suppressed melatonin, which made it harder for us to sleep. And I was like, wow, these are mad, these are big pain points, right? And it was only the iPhone 3 or 4 era at the time, and screens were getting bigger and brighter. So selfishly for myself, I didn't wear glasses, and I said, I need this technology. I want to make this for myself, right? And I went about and I set about on a journey on creating this technology that could go directly onto the device itself, stopping the blue light at the source. So fortunately, when I had the idea, there was a business competition at the university called Cass Business School, and I submitted, and after 2 stages, won the competition, and I got some grant from the funding from the university. And what that allowed me to do was research, create a technical specification, and create blue light blocking products such as screen filters, glasses, and lighting products. And that led me on the journey to creating the business called Ocushield, and that's kind of where we're here now today. With what we're trying to do, and what we're trying to do is protect eye health and let eyes thrive.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, from just improving eye health, probably more in the medical model, to now developing a piece of technology that can help improve eye health from an external perspective. Talk a little bit more about Ocushield, just so we understand, the organization, what kind of products you retail, kind of where the organization's at, maybe where it's going.
Yeah, totally. So Ocushield as a company, we're an eye care brand. What we want to do is provide the best products for a customer that cares about their eyes, right? So our hero products are medically registered screen protectors that go on smartphones. So what they do is they're tempered glass products. So they protect the asset as well as your eyes. So you put the filter on your screen, and it limits the blue light exposure, but it also keeps a crystal clear image. So unlike night mode or night shift that you have on your iPhone or computer, which turns your screen orange, our products selectively inhibit or remove the blue light without changing the colors. So that means if you're scrolling through TikTok or Instagram in the evening, you're not going to get an ugly orange, glow. Or if you're sending an email during the day, you're going to, again, you just have a nice clear screen. So that's our hero products, but we also have that in, glasses, and we also have it in a lighting product, which is something called the OcuLamp. So this is our all day, all night lamp. So some people may know, or may not know, but blue light is also emitted from the lighting around us. Now, there's actually there's more blue light in lighting around us, but because we don't look at it directly, it's allowed to have more blue light. And actually we thought, well, that's not quite fair. We should be able to control the lighting in the environment so we can have the light that's needed for our body, right? So with the OcuLamp, you can control the intensity. There's 3 temperatures on there. You have a cool white for the morning, so it gets you ready for the day. You have a warmer white for the afternoon when you're hard at work, and it's flicker free, and it's not going to be causing that eye strain. And in the evening, you can choose a warm white, and it has an anti-blue light filter built in. So the light you're having in your surroundings and around you is healthy for you, compared to your normal LED or fluorescent light bulb, which just has daylight white light, which is 5,000 Kelvin, which if you have it all throughout the day, you're going to mess up your circadian rhythm, but also cause strain on your eyes.
Got it. All right. So now we need to start to get into this blue light concept, because it's a lot of what your products are centered around. And we've talked about the importance of sleep and circadian physiology in the podcast before with Meeta Singh, who's a well-known sleep medicine physician. But in that podcast and none of our episodes have we ever really dove into this blue light concept. So that's where I'd like to start this discussion. And I think you just need to level set our audience on the most basic of principles of blue light, why it's important, and why your products work to mitigate it.
Yeah, totally. So let's take it back to kind of the here in the UK, call it GCSEs, but secondary school, right? Maybe college in the USA. But when you're learning about science, you're looking at the spectrum of light. On the left-hand side, we have ultraviolet light, which we're all familiar with, and that's 0 to 400 nanometers. And then what you have after that is visible light, which is all the light we see, which is usually 400 to 800 nanometers. And then 800 nanometers onwards, you have like radio waves, X-rays, right? Those are the kind of different lights within the spectrum. Now, what we're concerned with is the blue light, and where blue light sits in the spectrum is it's kind of between UV light and visible light. It sits between 380 to 500 nanometers, so it crosses both paths. But it makes its way into what we can see and sometimes what we can't see. And researchers have been looking at this ultraviolet blue light for a long time. And, through epidemiological or in vitro studies, what they found is actually because blue light is a shorter wavelength, what they mean by that is when you look at color, blue itself is shorter in the length of that wavelength of light compared to red, which is on the other side of the visible spectrum of light. And even though it's shorter, it also carries more energy, so less of it is required to cause a harmful effect. So researchers have found that blue light, as I mentioned, affects your eyes, sleep, and skin, which I can talk about a little bit later. But because it doesn't have to be also necessarily blue, we don't see blue in our screens, right? We see white light. Now, when we look at the way LEDs and screens are manufactured, they're made in 3 different ways, but 99% of them are made through something called a UV plus LED phosphor, which is a blue base. And what happens is it's converted into white light. So you're not seeing, blue, but that's where the light is created from. Now, when you take something called a spectrometer and you point it towards the screen, this is something that looks at the intensity of the different colors that come from a screen. Now, what you'll see is compared to all the other colors, the reds, the greens, the oranges, you'll see that blue, it has about 40% more of a spike than all the other colors in the spectrum of light. Now, if you couple that up with what the research says, which says blue light actually in cumulative exposure causes the visual stress and also stops us sleeping as well in the evening, then there's a problem there. So what Ocushield does is what we do is we create products that limit the spike in the blue light, so it's on level terms with the other colors, but it also means you can carry on using it, because with most healthcare innovation, if you have a product or a solution and you don't use it, let's say like software, because we have parents that use our products, right? They have smart kids, the kids turn off software and their parents are like, I just can't get them to, stay off screens or limit their blue light. So they put an Ocushield on and they say, right, they don't want to take that off. I know their eyes are protected and it doesn't affect the color clarity. So Ocushield is used as a piece of intervention to make sure we can live a healthier life with technology when we have to use screens.
Yeah, and we're using screens all the time, and more and more and more and more every day, it seems. And you also bring up a good point that I think all of us are kind of peripherally aware of, is that you said screens are only getting bigger and brighter and more robust. And it's not the job of the technology companies necessarily to be concerned with our eye health. It's actually their job to make sure we spend as much time with our eyes on their screens as possible. So let's dig a little deeper. So we've established that blue light is a form of light that disrupts, as you said, circadian rhythms, causes eye stress. We have fitness professionals that are listening to this podcast, and I think the role of sleep is becoming much more highly regarded in all fitness and wellness circles as just as critical as stress management, activity, nutrition, and so on. So let's talk a little bit about the downstream effect of this blue light exposure and how it can influence an individual's fitness and even more fundamentally their health.
Yeah, totally. And, we know with fitness or athletics, because we have a lot of customers and teams that want to, use our products. And the reason why is obviously, performance. We want to perform at our best level as possible. So anything that can make a difference is going to be really key. And we know for athletics or fitness professionals that actually sleep, is a pillar in life regardless, but it's even more important due to recovery. So what we know about sleep and blue light is, there is types of blue light which is good for you, which is in the morning, right? You need some blue light in the morning to set your circadian rhythm and tell your body it's the day. Now, the body realizes that because it has a sun to do that. Blue light is emitted from the sun, lights around us, and artificial screens, right? Blue light from the sun in the morning is good. Do wear UV protection, that is also important, but it's good in the morning, right? But what happens is, naturally the sun sets and the sun goes away. But what happens is what we're doing is we're taking the sun in the form of a digital device, putting it in the palm of our hands. And in the evening, when your body should be secreting the hormone called melatonin, which is the hormone that makes your body feel sleepy, it's actually suppressing that hormone. So your body's not getting ready for bed. Now, what happens is people will stay on their screens right up until the last minute, right? You might be sending a text or checking your calendar, your alarm, or watching something, and your body still thinks it's the daytime because there's not enough melatonin. And then what happens is you go into bed, you can't get to sleep because the melatonin is now starting to be built up, but it's still not at that concentration level where your body's ready to doze off. So you're tossing and turning for 30 minutes, 1 hour. You eventually get to sleep. And then when you do get to sleep, the quality of sleep isn't as good as you would have had it before if your melatonin concentration was as high as it needs to be. So therefore, you have a massive knock-on effect because, if you don't sleep well, it affects your your day-to-day, your normal cognitive functions. There's so many processes that happen to us biologically when we sleep that they just don't happen at their optimum level. And great example of this is in the prehistoric times, when we look at cavemen, in the night they used to light candles to see, right? And they could fall asleep when there's a fire or candles around them, because candles have zero blue light. They have red light, which doesn't affect your circadian rhythms. But what we have is white LED lighting in our homes, or we have white LED screens, which are stimulating those things in our body, which tells it it's the daytime. So that's how it affects performance. And I think fitness professionals definitely should be thinking about this and, guiding their kind of clients or teams around this, because it's gonna make that difference. It makes a huge difference if you get that part right.
I'd like to take a quick break from today's episode to tell you more about one of our sponsors. As all of you are well aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has been absolutely devastating for the fitness industry, with upwards of 1/3 of our clubs closing nationally on a permanent basis. One of the few stabilizing forces during this very tumultuous period of time has been URSA, the National Trade Association for the Health and Fitness Industry. On my crusade to make fitness professionals part of our healthcare continuum, the work that URSA is doing is absolutely vital. They provide advocacy and lobbying support at both the federal and the state level. They support state alliances in many ways, and they also provide resources and best practices to club owners, operators, and individual fitness professionals. Indeed, if we are truly going to become part of the healthcare continuum, we must speak with one unified voice. We must have best practices that we implement, and we must come together as an industry to ensure the public, the medical community, and lawmakers hear our message loud and clear, that movement is medicine and it is essential. That is the work that URSA is doing. They've recently revamped their membership structure, allowing large clubs, small clubs, boutiques, and individual professionals to join the organization for an appropriate price that allows them to have access to all of these many great resources and allows us to unify and amplify our voice as an industry. For more information on the amazing work that URSA is doing, go to their website, ursa.org. That's IHRSA.org, IHRSA.org, to look in a little bit further into the work URSA is doing to unify our industry, to move us closer to being a part of that healthcare continuum. Now back to today's episode. We talk about lack of sleep, and obviously it's a way that it impairs recovery, but just touch briefly on what other issues result from lack of sleep, maybe less so from an athlete perspective and just maybe more for the general population client that's working with a fitness or a wellness professional.
Yeah, sure. So you're looking at also cognitive function, right? When we sleep, you have your brain is trying to process everything it's had from the day and compartmentalize memories, for example. It's trying to associate things we've experienced in the day into different areas within our brain. So that's one process. It's also trying to detoxify. So it's also getting rid of elements in your brain which are around it, and removing that toxicity through biological processes. So for your cognition, it's really key to sleep better, right? And I think when your mind is better, you feel better, you get so much more done. And that's one of the key elements, I think, where sleeping is really important. And we look at diet, we look at eyes, we look at so many other elements of our body, and they all intertwine so nicely in the fact that our bodies are working together in those elements. And let's speak about eyes for a minute there as well. When we sleep, what's happening is usually your eyelids are closed. And the reason for that is you have something called your tear film, which is on your eyes, and that's what keeps your eyes lubricated. Now, when you're sleeping, you're also, you have something called a lacrimal gland, which is secreting lubricants onto your eye to make sure that it's being looked after. And also the cornea is regenerating as we sleep. Because if you didn't know, cornea has the most nerve endings than any other organ in the body. But every 24 hours, your cornea actually can regenerate. And it's one of the, again, organs in the body that can regenerate quicker than anything else. So that process when you're sleeping is really important, because to create a transparent window, which is what your cornea is. If it becomes opaque, you go blind, right? So by sleeping, you're actually regenerating your cornea and keeping it transparent. So again, if you're not sleeping well, after let's say if you don't sleep for a period of days or a week or whatever, something called neovascularization happens, which where blood vessels form on your cornea, right? Because it's trying to get oxygen, but it can't. So it's trying to get blood, it's building blood vessels so it can somehow attract oxygen from outside, but it's not regenerating. So there's so many little granular details that happen when you sleep in all parts of our body that it's really fascinating. And yeah, there's so much that can happen.
Yeah, and a lot of those discussions are beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but I'll refer listeners back to that earlier podcast. I want to say it's episode 3 or 4, very early on with Dr. Meeta Singh, where we actually dive into that a little bit more. So I'd be remiss if I didn't, if I had an eye care professional on our podcast and didn't talk a little bit more about maybe what we as fitness professionals should know about the eyes. I think we've definitely established the role that blue light plays in disruption of the circadian rhythms and the knock-on effects of that in terms of sleep and health. But I don't know about the rest of everyone that's listening, but I probably got a whole hour in undergrad of anatomy and physiology of the eye. And even the information you just gave us about the cornea, I find fascinating. I never knew that. So maybe you can drop some knowledge on us as fitness and wellness professionals, just of things in general that we should know about the eyes, given the populations we work with and what we're trying to achieve with them from a health perspective.
Yeah, so there's some really key elements which are quick wins, right, for anyone. And this is your day-to-day. So I always, so the visual system is like a muscle, right? When you have if you bring a finger up to your face and you bring it towards your nose, you'll see the eyes converge. And that's something known as convergence and accommodation working together. Now, if we're looking at a screen or we're writing on a piece of paper for, hours on end during our day, your visual system is having to converge and accommodate throughout that time. Now, when you, let's say, go to the gym, you do an exercise, you do 10 reps, maybe 30 reps if it's a low weight and you're trying to go for, more intensity, right? But you need to have a break after that. What we do with our eyes is we don't really pay attention to that. So a quick and easy win for everyone that is in any profession is something called the 20-20-20 rule. And what that is every 20 minutes, we should take a 20-second break and look 20 feet away. So what that means is that 20-minute break is effectively saying reset. 20 seconds is allowing that reset to happen. And 20 feet means you're looking effectively at infinity. Well, when you look at infinity, your eyes are no longer converging. They're actually looking straight on and actually diverging a little bit. And what happens there is you have a total reset of your visual system. Now, if you're like me, I work on a screen, I'm kind of office-based. 20 minutes goes like that, right? It goes quick. So you can adopt that rule, maybe call it the 45-20-20, whatever suits you. But again, you might also forget that, so put a post-it note on and put it on the screen, right? The two other things for me is also proximity and intensity. So coming back to convergence, accommodation, and blue light is actually turning down the brightness of your screen can massively help. Proximity, always use devices or even if you're writing something or reading something, an arm's length away is a really good distance for your eyes to work at. Anything closer, you're building that strain onto your eyes. And then some other nuggets for you is you may or may not know, but everyone, once they hit 40 to 45, some that are lucky, maybe it's 50, you go through something called presbyopia. And that's where your eye naturally loses its ability to accommodate. And that's when everyone needs reading glasses. And I like to always say there's 3 things guaranteed in life, right? Being born, dying, and needing reading glasses, because actually, 90% of people will need them unless they were short-sighted on the other side, then it kind of reverses. So that's something to think about, because a lot of people put it down to maybe their daily habits, or they think they're doing something wrong nutritionally or whatever, but it's something you can't avoid.
Hmm.
You can make your eyes work harder and have a less of an effect by doing the right things. So there's things such as eye yoga, limiting blue light, getting an eye examination. For example, just eye examination. We here in the UK, it's every 2 years. In the USA, I know it can be every 1 or 2 years. But even if your vision is good, make sure you have an eye examination, because we can actually pick up if there's a melanoma or a tumor in your eyes, or diabetes or glucose, all systemic things which you won't have symptoms of, but they'll be picked up on. And when you pick it up early, that's when you can have intervention and really make an impact on solving those issues, which then affect you in the rest of what you're doing. So yeah, hopefully there's some random but also objective facts in those elements of eyes.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm keen to ask about what eye yoga is. You mentioned eye yoga, and I'm sure we have some yoga practitioners that listen to this. Just define eye yoga for us.
Yeah, totally. So the eyes have many muscles. They're called extraocular muscles, and they help your eyes go in all different directions, right? And generally, when as humans, we don't really use those ranges of motion unless you're going shooting or you go to play baseball or cricket. You're following something around, but generally, we're stuck indoors. We're seeing each other's face. We're not usually on the range of movement. So what eye yoga does, it encourages you to use the extraocular muscles. So there's numerous exercises out there, right? So an example of this is one where, again, you look straight on. You don't move your head. You put your finger in the front of you, and what you're doing is you're moving that finger in 8 directions, right? So you're moving it until you can't, move it, follow it anymore, and then bring it back. And you do that in 8 directions, and you do that for 10 times in kind of a few minutes, and you do it every day. And what you're doing there is you're strengthening your extraocular muscles, because that is a range of motion they do not do every day. And again, you can do the one where you're bringing your finger towards your nose and do that again 10 times in 30 seconds, and you're strengthening that muscle up. There's also something called palming. So that's where you put the palms of your hands on your eyes when you've closed your eyes, not when they're open, or you might poke yourself in the eye, but you close your eyelids, put them on there, and effectively you put them on for a minute. But what this does, it encourages blood flow. It also encourages healing and resting of the eyes. So yeah, eye yoga it's a massive topic, and it's something actually current at the moment. There's a lot more people adopting it, and some people, I'm not too sure how scientifically correct this is, but there are some people that do also preserve myopia or short-sightedness by using eye yoga. Some people have had great experiences with it. So yeah, check it out if it's something you're interested in.
That's fascinating. One of my favorite things of doing podcast interviews is learning something that I would have never learned otherwise. And I don't think eye yoga would have ever crossed my email inbox or in any of the journals that I'm in. So I appreciate that. Let me ask what seems to be an obvious question on the surface, but then when I think about it for a second, as someone who doesn't understand eye health as well as what you do, and I'm sure this is very similar for a number of our listeners, what is the benefit to improving your eye health through all of these things that you're talking about? Certainly there's the obvious, like, we don't go blind, but not a lot of people are going blind at end of life, fortunately. So give us an idea of what the downstream benefit of all of this work could be.
Yeah, totally. So what I like to say is, when you're looking after your eyes, you're looking after so much more. There's 11 million sensory receptors in our body, right? And 10 million of them are in your eyes, believe it or not. And researchers found that 50% of your brain at any given minute is working on converting visual responses into an image or memory at any given time. So that means half your brain is working on that, right? And that's fascinating, because if you think about someone that has a refractive error, which means they can't see very well, or they just have a reduced amplitude of accommodation, convergent, blue light, or there's a bit of glare, you're increasing the amount your brain has to work. So let's say that goes up to a 75% because you might not be wearing your glasses, or there's a bit of glare or whatever, right? your brain only has then 25% of its normal functions to be able to do everything else, which is incredibly small comparing to how much your brain really can do. So I just think of the eyes as something that controls so much in what we're doing, and our visual pathway, which goes all the way around to the back of our occipital lobe, which is right at the back of our head. So yeah, just on that fact there, if you can control and make it easier for your eyes to do more and not do less, then you're going to perform better. And we work with athletes where they want to perform better day to day. So anything that can improve even by an inch, then they're going to try and do that. So I think from the eye health perspective is just really looking at it from that perspective. I'm really remembering those numbers. 11 million sensory receptors, 10 million are in your eyes. So, which is a massive number.
Yeah. Long story short is that by improving and maintaining your eye health, you basically free up brain resources to do the other important things that the brain needs to be involved in. And that's a perspective that I've never had on eye health before. Very interesting.
Yeah, totally.
Where is the research in your field going right now, particularly around blue light, but just in general, eye health research in general? If forecast out 5, 10, 20 years, where are we headed from a research perspective?
Yeah, I think we're looking at areas which are really interesting and exciting. And the reason why now eyes are getting more attention than ever before is because research recently has shown, what sense would you least likely want to lose? Most people, they say the eyes, right? No one wants to go blind. And actually, if you look at the data now, by 2050, macular degeneration is going to be the biggest cause of irreversible blindness in the world. And macular degeneration, we've got aging population, right, in the world. So it's a big problem. So now more research and money, research is, the only way research happens is through funding and money, right? So more money is going into that area because now people care about that, right? And it's a good thing because it means more people that suffer with these problems are going to see solutions or antidotes. But what I'm interested in is kind of development. So when you have a disease like macular degeneration, it's usually treated by injections in the eye, which have a certain ingredient. But now they're looking at, actually, how can we put this ingredient in an eye drop? So the ingredient they're looking at here is something called lutein, which is a macular pigment, which protects the eye against, macular degeneration. And they're saying, actually, we've just done a research study where we administered it via eye drop. It got absorbed into the body, and after a few months, the macular pigment density grew by 30%, which meant the natural protection increased, which is actually really fascinating. Because instead of increasing something in your diet or getting an injection, you can put it in as an eye drop. That is really game-changing stuff. And in the same way, they've also found out how an eye drop can stop you being short-sighted. So you're thinking, hold on, how is eye drops doing this? And again, what that eye drop does, it actually works on your accommodative system and ciliary muscles to allow you to see far away, which is almost incredible. So I think with the facility of using eye drops and putting drugs or ingredients in them is really going to help the human population protect and preserve their eyes for many years to come. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how those research studies come to life, because I think that's like the first stage. You want to go through more clinical trials and see if it's ready for the mass market. So we'll see that in the kind of next decade or two come into fruition.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And just personally, I think a lot of our listeners will agree. Anything that can be done that causes me to not have to get a shot in my eye sounds like a really, really important line of research, because that's cringeworthy just thinking about it, let alone having a procedure like that happen.
Yeah, it's incredible. You know what? Actually, if you don't know about cataracts, right, where the lens in the eye is replaced, it's a so when I was in my studies, I was gobsmacked to find that a cataract study where they cut open your eye and they suck out the lens with a hoover and put a new one in is done on the local anesthetic. So you are awake. So patients have this every day, right? It's the most regular surgery done, but patients are awake, but they have a local anesthetic, their eyes are clamped open, and you're having the lens removed. But it's just really interesting to me that this is done under local anesthetic, because when you think about it, you're like, hell no, I'm not going through that process.
Yeah. And what I also find really interesting about this conversation, and I think it's worth stating, is the majority of fitness and wellness professionals skew on the younger end of the spectrum. And I think we often don't think of deterioration of our eyes because, many of us are under the age of 40. I know I'm just over the age of 40. And what you said about, once you reach 40, you probably need readers. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, maybe I should try out some readers. But I think it's good awareness to bring to the population of fitness professionals that broadly exist out there, because we tend to not think of eye health issues because we're so young. And in many cases, we don't have those issues. So I really appreciate that perspective that we're bringing to our audience for this podcast.
Yeah, totally. And I'd love to add on that perspective as well is, as clients and, teams get older, it's something that you have to, deal with, but also a lot of people might be working with children. And what's really interesting to know about children is the lens in the eye, which again limits UV and blue light, it doesn't fully develop until their teenage years, right? So that's why children have to wear sunglasses more so than adults. But what's really interesting is now children are spending more time than ever on iPads and screens because they learn, they play, and we won't know the net impact of blue light on a child's eyes until maybe 4 or 5 decades, right? But screens are only 2 decades old, and no one's going to pay or follow children for 50 to 60 years to do a cohort study like that. But if you look at the science, there's already so many studies that point towards a problem, and if you map it out, there's something that will happen in the future where we've got to be cognizant of that. So if you are working with children, if they are working outdoors, look at UV light protection and look at blue light protection, and it's going to be really important for them. So you can mitigate some of those risks now in advance.
Fascinating. We talk about the deleterious effects of screen time and social media on physical activity levels and mental health, but I don't think I've ever heard of anyone put it from an eye health perspective before. And that is a very disconcerting type of problem, because you're right. We're not doing a 5-decade-long prospective cohort study right now on eye health and screen use, but that is I think an ounce of prevention goes a long way in that particular area. Very, very, very good point. Dhruvin, this is fascinating. Again, I think I'm most fascinated by this conversation because it's just not things that I consider on a day-by-day basis, given my background in exercise physiology. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to find this fascinating. Where can people go if they want to find out more about the things you're doing and Ocushield? Where are good places to keep in the loop with you and your team?
Yeah, totally. So hit us up on ocushield.com, which is OCUSHIELD.com. Follow us on our channels there, or contact us there. If you've got a question for me, I'm sure the message will find itself to me. I'm also doing a lot more content related to eyes as well, trying to bring more awareness, and you can find that on my Instagram or LinkedIn channel. If you type in my name, which is Dhruvin Patel, DHRUVINPATEL, you'll find me on those channels. And I'll welcome any questions or queries from anyone, wanting to learn more about eye health or blue light. And if anyone wants any Ocushield products as well, enter the code wellness20 on ocushield.com and you'll get 20% off our products, and hopefully that can serve you to allow you to let eyes thrive.
Awesome. And we're going to link up to all of that in the show notes, so our listeners have an opportunity to be able to engage with you. Again, I found this to be an absolutely fascinating conversation. And as with most fascinating conversations, it's probably started to generate more questions in my head than answers necessarily, but very, very informative. And I think a very unique area of consideration for our listeners. The last question to get to is the question I always end the podcast on. And I'm actually particularly excited to ask this question to you because you are a medical professional, but you're kind of outside of the normal scope of medical professionals that our field works with. We work with cardiologists and orthopedic surgeons and primary care physicians, but not necessarily optometrists. And the question is around the central thesis for the wellness paradox, which is that there's a trust and interaction and a communication gap between fitness and wellness professionals and medical professionals. And this podcast aims to close off that gap. From your perspective, if you can give the fitness professionals that are listening to this one piece of advice to close that gap off, what would it be?
I'd say surround yourself with experts in different fields. I think the more you learn through different parts of health, the more holistic and guided advice you can give to people you're speaking about. And a second one. And just keep doing what you're doing, because I know that the best fitness wellness professionals out there, right? They are examples of what they teach. They are living and breathing everything they know when it comes to nutrition, fitness, etc. And they're actually the ones that most people follow, because actually they can see the results. Most healthcare professionals in academia, usually they don't look as chiseled or well performed as fitness, wellness professionals. So actually, those things, you're already doing that well. But I think in the first part, surround yourself with more people that come from different areas of academia and health and science, and take it all in, and then be able to tell everyone about it.
Yeah, I think this podcast is a very tangible example of just that. Dhruvin Patel, thank you so much for joining us on the Wellness Paradox.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dhruvin as much as I did. If you found it insightful and valuable, please do share with your friends and colleagues. Those shares really make a difference for us. Any additional information from this episode we'd like to share with you can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 45. And also keep in mind that discount code that Dhruvin mentioned, wellness20, to receive 20% off any order from Ocushield. Please be on the lookout for next week's episode when it drops on Wednesday. And if you have a moment, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until we chat again, please be well.